My name is Ray Hughes, and I am the interviewer for the American Veterans History Project located here at the Cincinnati Public Library, Hamilton County, Ohio. Today's date is the 12th of January, 2015. And today we have the pleasure and honor of interviewing Frederick Outten, a Cincinnati native and resident of Hamilton County, Ohio. And Fred is a Vietnam veteran of the United States Air Force. Good morning, Fred.
And Ray, good morning to you.
Good. Fred, if you tell us a little bit about yourself, your full name, date of birth, and where you were born.
Ray, actually, my name is Fred Outten, and I was born June 6, 1944 in Hampton, Virginia. And I emphasize June 6, 1944 because that was D-Day. My mother often said it was perhaps the worst day in the world to have a child because she could get no attention from the nurses or doctors. They were glued to the radio. The invasion of Normandy was going on and they would not leave the radio. So I began there in Hampton, and shortly when I was 3 years old, we moved to the Eastern Shore of Virginia. My mother's maiden name was Mr. Vivian Mister, and my father was Otho Outten.
What was his first name?
Otho. O-T-H-O was the spelling, and I think they did that spelling to avoid saying Otto, because the family history puts us back in Alsace-Lorraine at the time that it was Germany. And the family apparently left Germany about 1666, and John Outten settled in Somerset County, Maryland. And from there, we can follow our traces all the way down to me and my children. So that is the beginning. And I guess this is an interview mostly about my military career, or do you want to know?
What schools did you go to, Fred?
I went to Exmoor Willis Wharf School. I remember it well. It was 2 miles from the house. Sometimes I rode my bicycle. Sometimes we rode the school bus. And then we did not have any middle school there. This is rural Virginia. There was no middle school. So from the elementary school to high school, Northampton High School. And Northampton was 24 miles from the house. So we had a healthy bus ride every day. And I won't say we really enjoyed it, but it was part of growing up. And I graduated from Northampton, and I went to the University of Virginia for a short period of time. Unfortunately, I probably was not ready to be college material at that time, and I dropped out for grades. And I worked a little while, and I recall being rural, you know a lot of people. And there was a woman named Cherie Ross, which was clerk of the local draft board. And she let me know that my name was next month. So in order to avoid being a foot soldier or Army, and again, we're talking the Vietnam era now, because we're 1965, I went down and joined the Air Force. And after joining the Air Force...
What was that date?
Oh, gee, that was July the 30th, 1965. Mm-hmm. And, of course, then I went to basic training in San Antonio, Texas. And from there, I went to tech school in Oklahoma. Let me see. It was in Oklahoma. Can't remember the name of the place. Okay.
And what kind of tech school?
Good point that, because when I enlisted in the Air Force and signed my name on the paper, they said I was going to go to accounting and finance. And it turns out they changed it. I ended up going in communications, telecommunications to be more specific, teletype operator, and probably not the most fun or glamorous job, but as they said, the needs of the Air Force. So Went to tech school there, and it was very interesting because I did not know how to type. Out of high school, I had no idea how to type, but if you're teletype, you have to type. And so I went to 6 weeks intensive training to be able to type. And from there, I went to Craig Air Force Base, Alabama. Craig Air Force Base is a pilot training wing. And if you're enlisted, that's probably as good a service as you're ever going to get, because since it's a pilot training wing, they don't have a lot of enlisted people on base, and as a consequence, civilians do most of the things that airmen or enlisted get stuck with in other places. There was no KP or that type of thing. It was just do your job every day. So I spent a while there, and then I received orders to go to Vietnam. And when I looked at the orders, I didn't really understood it just gave the code on it, 96307 or something like that. APO 96307. I said, what does this mean? And talked to some people and said, well, you're headed for Vietnam. So I did that. I went home, did my 30 days, and everybody was all upset. You're going to Vietnam, it's a terrible place. And I said, well, don't have an option here. So here's another funny thing here. The airlines was having a strike about the time I was going from Virginia to San Francisco. And so my options of getting to San Francisco were beginning to get thin, but it turns out I had a cousin who was going to go to school there, and we drove across country and had some adventures going across country before we reached San Francisco.
What period of time is this, Fred?
This would have been in the summer of 1966, because I was in Vietnam from, again, right about the end of July of 66 to the same time in 67. So I got on the plane and spent 20 hours in the air. That seemed to me to be an awful long time, but 20 hours, landed in Vietnam. And
where'd you land?
Tan Son Nhut Air Base, which was where I ended up staying. From the landing of the plane, and I remember it was Continental Airlines. From Continental Airlines plane straight to the commander of the 22nd Comm Squadron. I do not remember his name, but they were very friendly, and they assigned me a barracks. It was a building with open windows and screens on it and bunks, and so checked in there and moved in, and a little fun thing. I was young. I was from rural Virginia, and at that time, in Virginia, seeing people naked just wasn't part of the scheme. So my first day there, I went to take a shower, and I'm in the shower, and they hired civilian Vietnamese people to keep the place clean. I'm in the shower getting all soaped up, and this woman comes in who cleaned the shower, and all of a sudden I'm covering myself. She did not care. And at that point, I guess I lost most of my modesty, because I said, they don't care, I don't care. So I was assigned to what is called TACC, or was called TACC, which was the Tactical Air Control Center. Now, we were teletype, and what we did was transmit the air strikes that were going to happen the next day. So what I put out at 1 o'clock in the morning when I was on mid-shift were the location of where the strikes were going to be the next day, right down to the detail of what plane it was going to be. And I remember once in particular, you read the traffic. I was reading the traffic, and I remember seeing on one piece of paper that Devil 3 was going to be at a strike somewhere north of Da Nang. And then a little bit later on another transcript, I saw that Devil 3 was on another strike. And I guess I was out of line, but I asked the question. I said, can this plane be in two places at the same time? And my supervisor, I want to say commander, but the commander was not there at midnight. So my supervisor said, go upstairs and ask him. So young airman that I am, I'm going upstairs and knock on the door and go in there where all the brass is. And when I say brass, there's a lot of silver on the collars. And so I find an information officer and I said, just to make sure, is this what we want to do? And the guy says, yes, that plane will be in two places on two strikes. He will land, refuel, and have another strike. So I just thought it was a little bit of education on my part. And again, this is Tactical Air Control Center, so we knew what was going on more than most people did. Unfortunately, our building, and I don't mean building like here, our building, even though it was air conditioned because we had all of the teletype machinery there, and under hot weather it would go bad. But it was right next door to the morgue, so every time you walked out the door, you were looking at the morgue and at the bodies coming in. Not a real pleasant thing.
No.
We put out a lot of messages because we were a Tactical Air Control Center, and Charlie, or the Viet Cong, knew what we were. They made numerous efforts. I don't want to say many because that could get to be a big number, but they made numerous efforts to mortar our building. Now, we were off the end of a runway, and they were, of course, out in the boondocks. And they would set up, the Viet Cong would set up with their mortars, and they would start trying to shoot at us with the mortars. First of all, their accuracy wasn't good. And second, it takes a while to get your mortar aligned. And in the time that they had, after they've launched the first mortar, which was usually went off a random runway somewhere, before they could get off very many mortars at all, the Puffed Magic Dragon was out there. We had C-47s, still C-47s in Vietnam. Had C-47s, they were loaded with miniguns on the sides, and these miniguns would put something like 3,000 rounds a minute apiece. And they were, the gunship, or the Magic Dragon, would roll up on its side and go through the area where they were shooting from, because the mortar is kind of telltale, and they would go through the area, and then there was so much ammunition spent there, it'd be lucky if a snake crawled out of there alive. It was very drastic. So the whole time I was there, and all the times that they mortared us, they only actually hit the building once. And this is sad. It was the bathroom. They dropped the son of a gun mortar right in the bathroom. And the bathroom was like, as far as from where I am now to, I don't know, maybe 20 feet. And it contained the mortar, but it scared the hell out of me. I'm telling you it did.
I can imagine.
Yeah. I said, okay. And from then on, we used porta potties. So that was really my biggest experience with getting shot at or getting close to. Now, we were warned when we went into Saigon, as many of us did, that there were a lot of Viet Cong there who were looking to just knock off GIs. And there was one period of time when you had to be super careful. Apparently there was reported a woman on the back of a little scooter. Scooters were common in Vietnam. Everybody rode a little scooter. And there was a woman apparently who would go down the street, and when she'd see a GI alone, she'd pop him. And it was kind of a hazard. Everybody had to watch out. And then one day she shot at a Marine and missed, and he had his weapon with her, and that was the end of that show. So I want to say that it was somewhat hazardous. To me it was not really hazardous, more as eye-opening. Reflecting back on that, I thought Vietnam, to me, gave me something I had never had before. Growing up in rural Virginia, you got this view of what the world is like. A tour in Vietnam gives you a whole different point of view. So I came back in pretty good shape, and then I went to Oklahoma, and since my view had changed to what the world was like, at Oklahoma, I was at Oklahoma City Air Force Station. And since my view had changed up somewhat, I started taking college courses, and I excelled. Now, also, during this time, I had not been at Oklahoma City Air Force Station very long when the commander sent word that I was to be in his office. Now, I'm talking about the base commander. And I thought, good grief, what is this about? And I showed up in his office, and they presented me with a Air Force Commendation Medal for service in Vietnam. Apparently, while I was there, I did good work, and actually, I was put up for Airman of the Month for the base for several months while I was in Vietnam. So I was kind of proud of getting that Commendation Medal. It's not the Silver Star or anything like that, but if you're in communications, there's only so much you can do.
That's right.
So I got that, and I was doing well, and I was going to college, taking courses, and apparently I excelled at that too, because we had a program. The Air Force would give you $10 per semester hour for every A that you earned. And I was running the numbers up pretty well, and every semester I'd go up and get this nice check. Sometimes it was $60, sometimes it was $50, depending upon how many hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Air Force decided that it was worth mentioning, so they put me in the Air Force Times, which was published out of St. Louis, Missouri, and I had my picture taken. People came and interviewed me for making as much money as I did
Yes.
on the side, just going to class. And I thought, well, gee, there's nothing to this. Just go to class, make your grades, and a little extra money besides.
Right.
So that was a nice thing. While I was there at Oklahoma City Air Force Station, we had a blizzard come through. I remember it so well because I went over to Tinker, which was pretty much across the street, to do some training in the morning, and it was raining. And the temperature was low, sort of 34, 33 degrees. And the temperature dropped. And the rain ceased to be rain, everything turned to ice, everything turned to snow. We had a lot of snow. And so I didn't have duty, but I went to the communications center, and there were people in there whose wives were at home. And so I sent everybody home that I could possibly send home. And so once they were home, we ended up with snow up to 12-foot drifts. Oh yeah. Once they were home, there was no coming back. So I had the communications center by myself for a long period of time. And I didn't think it was a big deal, just sent some guys home. But the base commander thought it was a big deal. And so he wrote me a nice letter of congratulations. And had to stand up and get another thank you. So my time in the Air Force I considered to be excellent time. I was really going to do the Air Force career. It came time to re-enlist, and I went down and I said, I'm ready. I said, but I'm not going to be in communications anymore. And the sergeant said, that's fine. What do you want to do? I said, I want to fly. Put me in as a load master or something like that where I can get on the airplanes.
Right.
He said, fine, I'll put it here. I said, you put it down that that's what's going to happen. He said, I can't do that. I said, if you can't do that, then I'm not staying. So I left. And I often think that that may have been a mistake because I was actually enjoying the Air Force. I enjoyed things that most people didn't enjoy. I actually enjoyed the parades. You know, periodically we would have a parade and the commanders would come out and march around and everybody'd stand there nice and stiff. I actually enjoyed that. And it wasn't a bad life, but I had learned a lesson in that what they say you're going to do and what you end up doing may not be the same thing. And
Very true.
if he had just said, yes, this is what you're going to do, I would have probably stayed ad infinitum. However, I left the Air Force.
Now, when did you leave the Air Force?
I left the Air Force in late July 1969. And then I worked for Newport News Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company. And I worked on refueling the Enterprise. Actually, I worked on building submarines in the reactor compartment and refueling the Enterprise. Actually, I refueled the Enterprise twice from the radiological control aspect. It was very, very interesting. I remember the first time we refueled the Enterprise, the 2A plant was the plant I was responsible for. The Enterprise had 8 reactor plants.
Now, this is a nuclear.
Yes,
Yeah.
the Enterprise was nuclear. And the
Aircraft carrier.
big one. She was 1,109 feet long and 79,000 tons. Not as big as the Nimitz class, but we're talking 1965 here. So, and I remember so well because the first time we refueled her, the 2A plant was what I was responsible for as a radiological control monitor. And so I won't go into all the details of what it was, but when we lifted the head off of that, it was the first time that it was actually done. Because up till then, everybody had theorized and planned and pretty was sure, but we actually took it off. And things went closely according to plan, but not completely, as is always. They found that contamination, radioactive contamination, would escape a whole lot easier than they had planned. But it was a very exciting time for me. And then again in '69, I refueled that same Enterprise again. And I, I remember one night, one of the things with working around nuclear energy is that you don't put a radioactive vessel out in front of everybody and just leave it. And I was out, we had the vessel on the deck of the Enterprise where we had changed control rods for poison rods. And so we had control rods out on the deck, and the radiation contact on this vessel was like, I don't know, 2 or 3 R, but you get a little ways away and it died 2 or 3 Rinkins. You get a little ways away and the radiation died. But the temperature right there was 10 degrees on the deck of the Enterprise. I'm going to tell you that the wind coming off of the James River made that one really cold place. And it was at that time I thought, you know, back in the Air Force in that nice communication room, things were always warm. Right. So from there, while I was doing that, I met my future wife in a blind date.
What's her name?
Her name's Claire Anderson Outten. And I changed jobs. I left the shipyard, and I went to work for a chemical company. And Claire's name at the time was Claire Hell Anderson. And it was also funny, or I thought it was interesting, that at the Virginia Chemical Company, I was working with amines. And one of the amines I worked with was a thing called cyclohexylenolamine. And initials were CHA. Then I had Claire, CHA. So I thought that was interesting. You guys might remember, the older people like myself remember cyclamates. You remember cyclamates, the sugars?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Well, they were from cyclohexylamine, so I was involved in that. So during that time, I decided I was going back to college, and I got married in June 29th, 1970, and in the fall of 1970, I started back to college at Old Dominion University. And I did well.
Where?
Old Dominion University in Norfolk.
Sure.
And I did well. My previous experience at Virginia, some years before, I certainly had not applied myself, but now I found that education was not so bad. And the first semester, Claire was so proud of me. I really remember it because we went out and celebrated, got my first grades. The first grades I got back, I was carrying 16 hours, I think, and I came back with a 3.8 average. And Claire was so proud of me. I had one B. That was all. The rest of it were A's.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I went on through college, and then graduated and with a degree in engineering, and went out into the world.
When did you graduate?
I graduated in 1974. It was interesting the last semester because there was two courses offered at the same time, and both of them were required, and they were only offered in the spring. And in order to do it, I would have to take one this spring and then stick around for a whole year to take another year. So I negotiated with the teachers that I would take them both at the same time. And one teacher said, "I think you can do this." I will tell you that I did it. I would never recommend doing that again. It was awful. I spent all my time in a book, and then when I'd get to the exams, there were things that had happened in the lecture that I didn't know about. So I passed both of them, and I graduated that summer. I would not recommend anybody ever doing something like that again. So we moved off into work as an engineer. I worked for Eastman Kodak Company for a while, and then we had our first child in 1977. And negates make that 1978, and then the second child in 1980, and then the third child in 1982. Mm-hmm.
And what's her name?
Well, the first child is Juliet Lee Outten, and she has done well. I've been very, very proud of her. Of course, when she was born, I remember it so well because at that time you didn't know before the child was born. Mm-hmm. And I remember saying, "Claire, it's a girl, it's a girl, it's a girl, Claire." I was obviously excited. And she has done very well. She is now a patent attorney in Germany. My second child, Joel, has done well also. He is now let's see, what is the word? He's now for consulting firms, but he is a doctor in biomechanical engineering in Boston. And the third child has done well also. He's a physicist with the patent office in Washington. So we've had a good life, and then I was working for Fluor International, and they moved me here to Cincinnati.
Who?
Fluor International.
Yes.
They're a large construction firm. And they moved me here to Cincinnati, and then their presence in Cincinnati disappeared, and I had some choices to make, and so I'm here, and I'm retired here, and things are going well. I've had a pretty good life.
Who did you work for after Fluor then?
Well, okay, after Fluor, I worked for a company called SSOE. I actually told Fluor that I was retiring. Excuse me, that I was retiring. And so I did. I retired from Fluor, and inside of a month or month and a half, I had 2 job offers unsolicited. One was from a company called SSOE, which is located in Toledo, but we have an office here in Cincinnati. And the other was actually doing FEMA work in Louisiana. And I didn't think that the FEMA work in Louisiana really appealed to me. That looked like 12 hours a day minimum.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worked for SSOE for a while, then I retired. And then I went back because they needed somebody to do some work. And so it took 3 times for it to stick. But now I am retired and enjoying what I do. I enjoy the Hornet Club once a month, and I go to college. Again, I'm going to college again. And I've taken up playing a musical instruments. So that's kind of my story.
Fred, do you feel that the Air Force helped you in your life and your career?
Oh my God, I would not be where I am if I had not joined the Air Force. The Air Force exposed me to a world that I had no idea of in rural Virginia. People are different everywhere, but they're still people. I got to go to Vietnam, but while I was in Vietnam, I took my R&R in Japan, and they're people. Everybody has a life to live. And living in rural Virginia, where I grew up, you kind of get this small idea, well, that's not right. They shouldn't do that. That's not right. We know how to do it. Doesn't work that way. I felt like the Air Force, to me, 4 years in the Air Force really opened up the world for me, opened up everything. It actually gave me money to go back to college, which I did, and it taught me lots of things. It taught me a lot of self-discipline, although now many people say you have none, but it taught me a lot of self-discipline. And I would say for my career in the Air Force, my 4 years, I wouldn't take that for anything. I thought it was really good, and I'd do that over again in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Well, we hear that from a lot of people. Is there anything else that you would like to add to this interview today?
I don't know. I do appreciate the Hornet Club. That opened up my eyes even more because, and you introduced me to it. We were at the YMCA and you said you need to come to this Hornet Club. And I was over there and I met people like Tom Griffith and all the other people who have such great stories to tell. I was indeed intimidated the first time I was there because to me, all those guys around me had done so many great things. And I kind of looked at what I had done and thought, good grief. I'd send out teletype messages, whoopee.
Well, as Tom Griffin said, Tom Griffin meaning the Doolittle Raider said,
Yep.
You did your job and I did my job. And you did what was assigned to you.
Yeah.
And that's the amazing part about the military. Fortunately, not everybody has to be in combat, but everybody has to support the men that are in combat.
Well,
and
yes.
that was our job.
Yes, because
And
as I said at TACC, I knew where the plane was going to hit the next day for sure.
you played your part, an integral part in that, as did a lot of other men. Not every soldier was in combat, not every Marine was in combat, or every sailor. Likewise with the airmen. But they all did their job. And for that, I want to congratulate you, and I appreciate you conducting this interview with us.
This is actually kind of exciting for me. I'm really enjoying it.
And with that, we'll conclude our interview for today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fred.